us in terms of failed and abandoned projects and excessive costs and schedule overruns. Let me just quickly give two examples of what we know around us here. The collapse of the 21-story building in Ikoyi a few days ago, which of course is a project control and risk failure, whichever way you look at it, is one very good example. And of course, we see the Lagos Metro Line rail, which has been under construction for many years, and bears the scars of a schedule overrun if the cost overrun is not that obvious, because we don't have the numbers. The importance of project control and risk management can therefore not be overemphasized. We have reached out to a very seasoned project manager, consultant, and professor in the person of Dr. Sean Regan to elaborate on the importance of project controls and risk management for us this afternoon. Sean has many qualifications and laurels and wears many caps. A few will therefore suffice. He's a member of the Association of Advanced Cost Engineers, fellow AACE, full member, certified cost professional, certified estimating professional, and end value professional, O.T. Zimmerman Award, Director Region 9 AACE Educational Board, Co-Chair Eastern European Committee 2016-2017, American Conference Construction Educator Member, College of Performance Management, Metrics, Charter Surveyor, Fellow, Project Controls, Project Control Guide, etc., etc., etc. There are very many. So that's just a snapshot. It is my pleasure, therefore, to call on Dr. Regan to make a presentation to us on this topic. But just quickly, housekeeping, let us all mute ourselves so that background noise can be reduced. And we will take questions at the end of the paper so that there's no interruption. Thank you very much all for joining us, and over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome everybody. As Sam said, and I introduced, the topic of the presentation and the first of the series is the significance of project controls and risk management in the delivery of projects at the best value. The combination of LGM International and work with SSAC that we've done. In a general introduction about the topic to put everybody's mind in place. Currently, as identified by the Construction Industry Institute, which is a nonprofit industry and educational-backed organization, they basically have analyzed more than 300 mega projects, and they do this on an annual basis. And based on them, Murrow, currently the leader, concluded that approximately 65% of the projects fail to achieve the performance objectives established at sanction or time of initiation. In addition, these results are even worse in the oil and gas sector, where close to 78% of the mega projects failed cost, schedule, and performance reviews. This is basically further corroborated by a recent Ernst & Young study that they concluded that 73% of the mega projects they studied experienced schedule overruns, 64% had cost overruns, and an average of 59% were higher than original estimates. This has been an ongoing trend for almost 20 years. Regrettably, despite the technology and items that have taken place and the lessons learned, we still continue to operate in the same way we operated in. And if it wasn't for the new technology and others, the position would be even worse. What we're going to do today is basically based upon the CII data. I have a presentation for about 30 minutes, maybe a little more, that discusses the importance of project controls. This is initiation, planning, monitoring, controlling, communicating, and closing out project costs and schedule. We will then talk about how to mitigate risk on projects, and then how to deal with project controls and risk successfully at a project level with the best meeting of the parameters to meet best costs, and in addition, look at efficiency for the project so they can meet the parameters of cost, schedule, and scope in regards to the effectiveness of the program. So as Sam mentioned, I have basically worked in the industry for more than 38 years. I've been in an engineering role, project management and controls. Currently, I'm residing in California. Due to COVID and stuff and my father's age, I was asked to assume the corporation. So we do real estate, and then I've added engineering, construction, general construction, and solar engineering, and working on specialty roofing. I belong to quite a few associations, and the reason why is my learning and the process that we're going to discuss is I was taught by some of the best in Bechtel over 30 years ago that you do the best in project controls and you have less succeed, more succession and less failures. So strong project controls was preached by Bechtel to all of its members in all departments. And so I sort of followed that. But one of the key lessons learned is mentoring and basically taking the lessons learned that you've done and apply back to the industry. And that's what I'm trying to do. Now, the basis of project controls follows usually through AACE, the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering International. And they basically introduced a guide called Total Cost Management, or now known as the TCM framework. And this is a systematic guide that basically aligns up with PMI, IPMA, and others in approaching at a strategic level. And then AACE builds upon that and gets a tactical level at the detail. And they focus on the effective application of professional and technical expertise to plan and control resources, costs, profitability, and risk. So simply stated, it's a systematic approach to managing costs throughout the life cycle of any enterprise and the program, facility, project, product, or service. It works for manufacturing, IP, and EPC construction. And we do this through accomplishing the application of cost engineering and cost management principles through proven methodologies and utilization of the latest technology in support of the management process. So based upon that, it really comes down to the simple term for TCM. It costs time, it costs resources, it costs money. And as such, everything invested in both the assets and projects is related to cost. We basically look at it and break it down into three general areas. Profitable asset portfolios. These basically make sure resources go and produce the best IRR, RONA, and EVA. In addition, it integrates and aligns programs to make sure projects are coordinated and integrated. And it provides a systematic base of tools and professional training that allows us to get the results that we're looking for. So it's basically aligned with a continuous business strategy that allows us to focus on the asset and lifecycle management. Now, in this, we look at our return on assets as being driven by practices used before the project begins. It takes the idea, runs it from cradle to grave of the implementation and conclusion to startup and operation, and then continues offward. So as such, TCM allows owners to understand and manage the cost of their asset base over the asset life cycle. Successful projects that have done this are required to basically then return those achievements and bring them around, producing a life cycle. Simply speaking, looking at the strategic and functional lines, we can basically identify what has happened, how it's happened, when it's happened, and how we can successfully achieve this. To do that, the TCM adopted the TQM processes of Deming and Schuler. TCM is basically a quality management review process that adapts to the implementation of project controls to support project management. We plan the activities, we do the work, we check it or measure the performance, and we evaluate those measures, and then we resume. So basically you do it at a project level, then you run it at a monthly level so that you're able to do the results and identify them through, i.e. the continuous improvement. In addition, the PDA cycle adapts the EVM process with its feedback and improvement. One of the key improvements that's been integrated in, or continues to be integrated in, is the ISO standards. The ISO 21500 series of EVM is being adapted into a PMI, IPMA, and AACE so that it represents the overall process. The ANSI 748 basis for the ISO series provides the integration of the scope, estimate, cost, scheduling, risk, and contract management, and has been one of the most successfully endorsed ISO programs to date. In looking at that, we look at the fact that ideation, planning, execution, and closure are similarly wrapped around by the PDCA to cover the entire asset and life cycle. And the TCM is a framework with basically identified sections by numbers, so you can refer to an item or flow, identify the numbers of input, and go back to that section review. It's basically a recursive process within the strategic asset management process of the level 1 of the TCM process. So we basically plan the asset, implement the project, assess the performance, and act upon that performance and begin through. And beneath that, we break it down to project planning, utilization of activities, checking through performance measurement or EVM, and providing the performance measurement assessment and analysis. The framework of the TCM basically has 4 items: the basic processes of TCM, the functional processes of strategic asset management, and the functional processes of project control. But one of the areas that usually gets missed is the enabling process. This is where we basically work through society, people and performance, information management, quality, value management, and environmental health and safety to wrap up the project management perspective with the total framework. So in looking at the level 2, we start breaking down project controls through the PDCA. You can basically see that the project's basically reviewed from the planning and assessment through their development and work, and then through the different alignments. You can see the categorizations of the numbers that follow through the framework, so we can follow the TCM process. Key is that the board of the working level processes that I focus on heavily is cost estimating and budgeting, and the failures in that area due to the fact of poor estimating practices or poor budgeting processes. We spend a lot of time to do it wrong once and twice as amount to try to fix what we did wrong, because we think we're saving money by skimping on the planning. So when we look at the working level process, we try to break down the functional alignments. We plan for the budget. We basically then identify the quantity so that we can measure the scope and that we can establish a cost and scope content analysis. We then price and cost the estimate, which then basically establishes our budgetary cost and allows us to analyze cash flow. And then basically by doing that, we can then take what we've done in the review of the estimate through documenting through the basis of estimate and the estimate plan and build the cost estimate. So from there, the estimating process then moves into the cost and control baseline. So what the framework basically does is basically support the overall program. But the enabling processes that come within, such as the client and the society you're working in, the people and performance management, the information, quality, value, and environmental health and safety are all incorporated in. For example, when I took the AACE certifications of Certified Cost Professional, which is in the entire TCM framework, strategic and engineering economics, certified planner, certified estimator, certified EVM, I've basically identified all the specialist skills. But as a contractor and my contractor's licensing, they basically require as a contractor all the aspects that we just discussed, plus the incorporation of the enabling process. If you don't balance the two, you will not pass any of the certifications or any licensing. So we look at taking these processes and continuing them through. So generally for CCPs or cost professionals, they basically focus on their 6 knowledge areas, but 2 of the knowledge areas are our focus. The first basically has cost, pricing, material, labor, engineering, machinery, equipment, economic cost, and then utilizing activity-based cost management to perform them. In this, the cost elements will basically look at that there are three attributable assets to it. We have the price or cost, the features, i.e. performance, and the availability in the schedule to perform an activity or acquisition of an asset. In these costs, we basically then break them down into three categories: direct cost, fixed cost, and variable cost. And with these cost groupings, we're allowed to functionally align and go through. The cost classification of direct and indirect is one of the most standard processes in both construction and manufacturing. In the direct costs, we look at labor, material, equipment, and subcontract. And our indirect costs are our taxes, general conditions, risk or reward, i.e. profit and contingency, or overhead. In some aspects, some of the indirects may be broken down that there may be direct cost overheads, also known as other direct costs, but they still would be broken down among the labor, equipment, material, and subcontract classifications. So in looking at that, we basically functionally align that a project has a life cycle. So taking anything, through, you can map it. So I looked at basically taking, simply speaking, a deck that I'm doing at my house right now. The requirements of the design mean I have to draw plans, get permit, and pay for a fee. The second aspect is I want to construct it, but to construct it, I have to get the materials, and then I have to execute the work from forming to the footings to installation of the lumber or the material, painting and processes, and how those can be done. We then look at what is the aspects of maintenance every 5 years for the deck for repainting, and termite inspections every 2 years. And the life cycle is generally 25 years where we have to remove everything and replant. Now, looking at the life cycle, we can also look at the other aspects. By substituting composite decking, such as Trek or Aztrek, I can basically replace steps in step 2, painting the deck and the items, because Trek's a composite. And instead of repainting every 5 years and inspecting every 2, I only have to termite inspect every 10 years because it's composite, it doesn't lose color. So by saving steps, the economic value goes around. And that's what the life cycle cost does to you. It helps you manage the cost management through the estimates, the trend, and the forecast. But it allows you to look at the life cycle and options. Just because it was good in one location, in one area, on one project, does not necessarily behoove that it is the same on another project. So by looking at that, you're able to balance the project and look at new options and maybe come up with economical ways to save it. Now, in doing that, we have to be able to account for the cost. And cost accounting is not like general GAAP accounting. It basically focuses on the historical reporting of disbursements, costs, and expenditures on a project, as well as it looks at forecasting and utilization of the tools. So we look at the cost process and the involvement of it through the technical, and we can then basically see that through the feedback process through the PDCA, you can see that business, engineering, estimating, project direction or management, construction, operations, and commissioning, and engineering all have different peaks and valleys throughout the project. And in these peaks or valleys, you go from business planning, I have an idea, I want to build a plant, to feasibility. To build that plan in that location based upon the engineering and technology has a budget. That's the feasibility. You then plan it out for your class 3 estimate to establish your budget. And then you do your execution and startup, which also concludes with completing class 4 and class 5 estimates. So there's a relation between the estimate, the actual cost, and the work scope, and the percentage of design complete that ties into the project management implementation. Now, in looking at that, our most critical aspects is our opportunity of influence. And as a project is basically going through its schedule and starts doing its engineering and procurement and then cost, it basically goes through and establishes, and as the cost goes up and items are procured, you have that decreasing ability to basically influence the project. What is critical about this is there comes a point of no return where you cannot value engineer anymore. Then from that part, you have to do constructability reviews. So everything while engineering is being done, you take the engineering that's complete, and then try to implement value engineering will help you successfully influence the project. If you try to do value engineering while you're engineering on the project, that does not meet the qualification of value engineering. That's just cost reduction, and you lose your potential savings. You have to put a stick in the sand or have a point of measurement of the completion of engineering to evaluate so that you can implement value engineering. And this is what we do. So we can incorporate this through another aspect also of front-end loading. And front-end loading looks at the fact that of the percentage above or below industry average cost, depending on the value, for each 5% of lower cost, you can only get a 1% return on earnings on the program. So we try to front-end load the project so that we have not just adequate, but better than adequate resources so that we can get ahead of the program. And in doing that, meet the qualifications and assignments that we have done. In addition, we looked at the improved constructability of any design. And in doing that, the constructability analysis reviews the fact of how the construction can be done in both general fabrication or manufacturing, and how we can basically yield control costs of those items. And we look at that through the aspects of basically make or buy. In the make or buy decision, we consider the quality and cost on an item compared with outside suppliers. It's basically looking at that, or through the items that have been produced, a decision can be made between it. Then we can basically utilize that to basically create a goal of enhancing the project in cost. Now, one of the areas that has had impact as of late is the fact that health and safety on a lot of projects gets cut because of the cost of basically doing items such, and what this happens is that basically this results in some areas of the project not being worthy. In addition, health and safety requirements are different in different categories of construction and countries and have an impact. A simple accident such as a strap breaking, even though the strap was checked and good, but due to just basically pressure and fault, basically knocks a guy's helmet off and he gets 2 stitches in his head, could cost the project 20% more in their insurance on health and safety. That could be the result. That could result in hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars on all projects that are insured by that company in the division. So safety is a quality aspect that must be utilized. Now, the second area that we look at generally in cost in knowledge areas 2 is cost estimating. And we do this through the general cost estimating and then application differences for basically process product or discrete part manufacturing in the industry. We're going to focus on cost estimating, and it's generally a predictive process used to quantify cost and price of the resources required by the scope of an investment, activity, option, or project to be completed. One of the key ways of doing that is we try to determine the economic feasibility so that we have the ability to evaluate between alternatives, as we discussed previously, to establish a budget, and that this provides a basis of cost, schedule, and control. We utilize in the TCM, and this is recognized by PMI, IPMA, and others, the estimate classification system. The estimate classification system has 5 levels, from the class 5, which is a concept of 0 to 2% design, through the class 4, which is a study or feasibility, the class 3, which is 10 to 40% design under fast tracking, that authorizes the budget, the class 2, which basically is a control of bid and tender, which is 30 to 75% design and allocates for the work being done, and the class 1, which represents 65 to 100% and takes you to the completion of the project, the comparison of the analysis, and then basically placing that back in a performance database to support projects in progress or being estimated. In addition to that, there's a preparation cost for it. So we try to focus on that between the estimate class, the amount of effort that should be applied to do the estimate should be in accordance to the type of estimate and the accuracy that's going to be achieved. A class 5 basically should be simply more than a factor estimate and should be done in hours, if not minutes. A class 4 basically takes that feasibility, looks at the design, and sort of applies some general factoring and percentages against it. The class 3 should take a significant amount of time. And then basically the class 2 and class 1, the reason why the cost of preparation goes up is you're incorporating the actual cost of the work performed and incorporating it into the program so that you can reflect it. The third area of the skills area that they're focused on is planning and scheduling. Project planning and project scheduling are different. The project plan starts from the incorporation of team to the conclusion. There is probably 60% of the work is developing a plan so that the schedule can be developed, which basically should be about 10% of the time. And then we use the remaining 30% of our time monitoring the schedule and revising the plan accordingly with change control and risk. Project planning basically follows the PDCA cycle, is that you plan the work, perform, measure, and evaluate. And through that process of planning, you can then basically bring through a process that establishes a baseline and incorporates our performance or earned value techniques into the program. In doing this, we should basically focus on that the schedule and estimate are developed in parallel to each other, but separately, and then built upon each other at key critical junctures to determine if the estimate is following the schedule basis and the schedule has the estimate for resource loading. To do that resource loading, we basically have to allocate or designate a budget hierarchy. This is done through taking the WBS and incorporating a cost breakdown structure, which incorporates the lowest level of the WBS. And then within that, you have your cost accounts that then have work packages or planning packages that represent the resources, value, and schedule of the work. We then have to allocate management reserve for potential changes on the project that are within the scope of work. And we may have work in the future, but the budget has not been distributed yet because in fast track, we start work while we're going through the process. In addition, we look at the performance measurement baseline, the rules of management, and other baselines and reviews are incorporated so that we've established a time phase budget and schedule that corresponds to the control account. This has to be representative to the work being done and establish a critical path with clear deliverables, milestones, and goals so that management can ensue and review the process. This allows us to adapt to the earned value process of knowledge area 4 and incorporate performance and productivity overviews that basically come through. To understanding EVM, you understand that there's a TCM framework, the EVM processes, there's a formal definition of EVM adapted by PMI and ISO, and what are the principles and basis that are done that form the ANSI 748 that allowed us to focus on EVM, or the quality management process. In doing this, EVM takes the overall process and measures your cumulative value and measures your period value, and does this on a monthly basis through the PDCA, checking the schedule productivity, the cost against the productivity of work being done, analyzes change and risk, and incorporates that and allows you to make deterministic items. Now, EVM's benefits, as we discussed, is greatly amount to the time phase budget and its integration. It encourages people to speak, as well as basically provides a clear and transparent means and method that allows the project to forecast and develop estimate to complete and estimate completion, as well as incorporate changes and then summarize the project in a method of management. Now, one of the key aspects of that adapts into our project risk management. And in our project risk management session, we focus on the fact that we identify the risk. From that, we are then able to establish qualitative and quantitative basis of the risk and then analyze that. Basically define our processes and then act upon those processes as we've identified through. Now, risk management heavily involved with risk planning, and risk planning establishes an approach, form, and content for the risk. It is based upon a risk management plan that is based upon the basis of estimate, the basis of schedule, and the basis of engineering, which are derivatives of basically the estimate execution plan. And as such, the project then recognizes and implements risk in a timely fashion. In risk assessment, we identify and analyze by bringing in the entire project team. And when I mean entire, I mean entire. That is the administration, ES&H, QA, QC, community relations, engineering, procurement, and construction by disciplines, so they can clearly identify and analyze the risk. From them, they can basically then look at the probability of occurrence based on a rating, based upon prioritization, based upon the expertise of the project team members. And you can use a 3 scale, 5 scale, or 7 scale. I generally prefer the 5, which goes from very low to moderate to high and very high on both the consequences and probability of occurrence, and then allows us to basically rank or score them in an ability to look at the probability and the opportunities of both threats and opportunities. And basically in measuring them, we can basically evaluate and score and establish a quantitative analysis of them. From them, we can look at the expected value and utilize range or parametric modeling, as well as establish our contingency that is basically allocated to come through. We do this by application of a risk workshop. And in the risk workshop, we focus on project size and complexity, as well as the resources that are allocated and managed within them, taking in consideration the 4 steps of the process to assess, evaluate, manage, and measure and implement. And in doing this allows us to basically focus. The risk workshops generally are best when set up by utilizing either an internal or an external monitor. If an internal moderator is used within the company, they should be from a different project or from a centralized functional group that supports the matrix or the project. It sets up a workshop and usually runs 2 to 3 days with all the project members involved. And then basically in going through the meeting, he facilitates and moderates items to identify all the risks. They are then coded, and an initial assessment is done with the moderator then interviewing the key functional leads, and then from them, he establishes a qualitative assessment. They then communicate this to the project team to make sure. Simply speaking, if you have a multi-year project with millions and billions of dollars, if you sit there and look at your probability of ratios in there, and you only have 7 items in, and say you have a 90% probability of meeting your cost, schedule, and risk, you're fooling yourself. There is no way you can predicate what's going to happen in the future. If you don't believe that, just simply think about COVID. Nobody thought about it, nobody implemented it, and the results we are seeing worldwide. Contingency would be used to address those things up until the point where maybe it's like a pandemic, a war, a terrorist, a hurricane, or a cyclone, or a typhoon. That is when force majeure kicks in because it is beyond what the scope of work is. Contingency is established to address what we call the residual risk, and it is done in either schedule or dollars to evaluate the estimate and the resource loading and look at the impact of both threats and opportunities to assess. It is done with a primary register, and every month the register is built upon, and plus or minuses are added to the risk based upon those items in application. It is utilized through basically using statistical and probability means, and one of the key items usually utilized is the Monte Carlo method, which basically runs simulations through algorithms of random sampling. Simply speaking, it looks at the potential iteration or impact on it, and we basically use modeling, and in this modeling we calculate a peak and valley or a probability. In doing this, the total cost or probable costs are established in a probabilistic doing, and there's a bell curve. And based upon that bell curve, we look at a ratio number that we try to receive. A P10 means you have a 10% chance of meeting risk and schedule. A P50 means a 50% probability. A P80 or P90 is 80 or 90%. So generally speaking, I look at a project. If I see a P90 on a long-term project, I know that that the project is basically setting itself up to fail. I expect on a multi-year project with a multi-budget to have a P10 and a register of everything potentially from weather to labor to other works to political changes that could be in that time period over those periods. And doing that, I account for it. And that would be considered a reasonable schedule and what we would look at. We do that through addressing 7.6.2.3 of the TCM framework. And the TCM framework basically focuses on evaluating, selecting, developing, validating, and ascertaining, updating, and identifying. If we look at the fact that we have looked at all our risk response strategies, that we have basically selected the risk and level of them from high, medium, and low, so that we can develop actions of implementation, dollar, schedule, or scope, and we look at them and validate them. We can then basically, through the schedule process, look at the applications and processes and come through and look through how we're basically identifying any secondary or threats of opportunity that have come through. We do this through basically avoid, reduce, transfer, and accepting of risk. Avoiding is basically either eliminating the probability of impact or basically clarifying items that are within. Reducing is mitigating key drivers to reduce probability and impact. Transfer is basically the transfer of threat to a competent third party, which can be done through insurance or contractual clauses, or we accept them, that there can be no action proactively taken and we have to accept the result. And we look at those every month on those items and come through and determine how we're going. In looking at this, we look at the aspects of the risk, so in the what key aspects of opportunity and threat. In an opportunity, which is usually one of the most often things that they can do, and it basically comes through, and we try to exploit, share, enhance, or accept them. And in doing that, we can involve our risk, involve our people, and involve the acceptance. The team is part of it, and it's done a monthly review. So the system basically looks at from risk planning to assessment to treatment to control. If you act upon the risk, then you go back to your treating. If you modify, you have to reassess. And if it's a new risk, you have to go through the cycle again, so you've established the full aspect. One of the things that we may want to do is look at the fact that projects basically prepare or perform to the risk techniques that they're doing and the level at which they're doing. This basically should provide guidance on the practical approach and the conducting of risk management and Monte Carlo workshops so that we complete that. In the end, risk management is one of the most conclusive items of the project. So this sort of summarizes the project controls and risk management scenario that we were discussing. It basically looks upon the fact that these have been incorporated in projects. I've done them on simple projects, such as I've identified my project deck, to basically large projects worth billions of dollars in both the nuclear and oil and gas industry. Currently, I look at risk every day. Right now, it's raining where I'm at in California. Tomorrow, I'm supposed to pour concrete. I have a risk if we don't do it, I have to move the concrete pour. And the problem is, due to COVID, that could be a 3-week delay. So we have to come up with evaluation. So we will do things like trying to put pumps in the trench and throw lime and cement in to try to stabilize the mud on the bottom for the concrete placement. Those are the types of things you look in risk assessment. It can be at a detail level for a small project, or they can be at a mega project level when we look at consideration. So that concludes the presentation, and we'll basically conclude with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. I think that is a very good justice to the topic of project controls and risk management on the project. We await questions. Steve, over to you on the issue. I think you want to take a poll or something?
Okay, sir. So we are going to take. I have a question from Dr. Sin. So he said, nice presentation. Under the life cycle, is 25 years the ideal lifespan for all structures, or just for illustration purposes? I'll say that again. Under the
actually, I was going to say, I understand that. No, 25 years is actually pretty much from general construction all the way through nuclear, is generally considered a major portion of life cycle. Within that process, depending on the type of equipment being used, and I'll use oil and gas, which more people are familiar with than even myself. When I did oil and gas refineries, we looked at the fact that refineries, we gave them generally a 25-year life cycle. And when we were planning the asset costs for capitalization and optimization, we could look at the type of equipment and the amount of outages required. So we could use a Sundyne compressor, which has cost $1 million and has a 10-year span, and then you just replace it. Or we could use different compressors, but they have to have an outage every 4 to 5 years to basically recycle it so that it would meet its 10 to 12-year lifespan. And they cost about $500,000. But in that life cycle, I have to consider the outage. And in an outage, that means I take production down to 0 or minimal, which means I could lose, 30 million barrels a day, depending on the size of the refinery, or $1 million a day is either gas or oil. So we use 25 years because it's an average. Now, some things like nuclear, they have 25-year on one part, but the physical plant has a 50-year lifespan. But in that 25 years, you have to do outages for spent fuel. So generally on most things, housing, commercial, capital construction, we look at 25 years before a sizable amount is done and impacted.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sean. Steve, do we have any other questions or some?
Yeah. Yes, sir. So someone also asked Dr. Godson as well. Said, is TCM part of project management BOK? That's a body of knowledge. Is TCM part of project management body of knowledge? So, what do you?
TCM is a framework that was adapted and created by AACE as the Total Cost Management Framework. The PMBOK is PMI standalone document. The PMBOK goes into a larger amount of areas than the TCM framework because the TCM is focusing on the project control aspects or support. It's not directly referenced in the PMBOK, but the processes of project controls from planning through estimating through execution and EVM, they reference each other and sort of cross each other in that point so that they have key points to each other. What I tell people simply is you can't take the PMBOK by itself without understanding the details, and you can't take the TCM without something like the PMBOK, which identifies the overall level. They're like a leg on a chair. Try standing on a three-legged chair, you probably will fall over. You need each leg. You need the PMBOK, you need the TCM, you need the ISO and EVM standards, and you need the other standards of enabling, such as quality, health, and safety, to make the chair work properly. So, any other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Any other questions, Steve?
Don't any other questions. If we have questions. Okay, we have from Mrs. Linda. You said, awesome presentation. My question is, at what stage should one use the Monte Carlo to calculate risk?
Monte Carlo is basically to be established used while you're doing your engineering, procurement, and construction. It basically should be started in parallel and during the planning process. As items are basically brought through in the plan, we basically bring them through and look at trying to run the simulations at different phases as we've gone through. So it's basically an iterative process. I do it at the beginning during the workshop, and I do it through the end and completion of the steps.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. We have one more from Mr. Godwin. What are the measures to put in place to ensure we do not have OTB over the target baseline, considering the fact that most major capital outlay?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Oh, okay. What are the measures to put in place to ensure that we do not have OTB? OTB in bracket is over the target baseline, considering the fact that most projects are major capital outlay.
Well, basically, that's where the risk should be coming in. You know, and you should the percentage of contingency that should be done is basically applied to the level of competency that you think you are in your levels. And one of the problems that I generally see that has caused from OTB was failure to address the risk and provide adequate contingency. I've walked in the projects where they were 40% designed and had 3% contingency, while the recommendation through AACE would have been 20 to 25% contingency. And so they started implementing and they set up their plan with no contingency. Simply speaking, they guaranteed themselves a failure, which guarantees an OTB. So the best way to do it is basically to evaluate the project based upon the percentage of design deliverables done that the estimate can go through. And then they, you know, have on an oil and gas, when I would estimate them for Jacobs, Bechtel, BP, Chevron, we would basically at 40% design be running 20 to 25% contingency on electrical and items because they were still being designed. And on the civil construction work, which are working, we would basically have the 10% design and 10% contingency on the items that are designed, sorry. So we never got that below 10%. I have minimized OTBs, and I've been through close to 40 earned value audits from the Department of Defense, Ernst & Young, and other firms like that, and never had an OTB when we ran our contingency like that. I've been brought on the projects that had OTB, and every single one of them did not have adequate contingency, did not run risk monthly, and basically got to a percentage point in the project that they were 70% spent on 30% work. So it's critical to try to have your contingency and risk planning and do them on an earlier basis.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the questions coming in.
Yeah.
I have another one from Dr. Godson. Dr. Godson, thank you for these questions. So, number one, for the project to take off, who are key participants? For the project to take off meeting, who are key participants, and can progress meetings also be held? Did you get that, or should I repeat?
Yeah, please repeat.
So he has two questions. The first one, for the project takeoff meeting, who are key participants? Then the second one, can progress meetings also be held?
For me, on a kickoff meeting is basically each one of the functional engineering leads, procurement, buyers, logistics, project control planner, scheduler, estimator, risk, project manager, QA, QC, HSE, quality, and the administrative staff for the management team, at least the administrative lead and document control. They all have an impact on the project. I've watched projects where they refuse to bring the administrative staff and the support staff in, and then the project manager was complaining because he basically was on economy flights and didn't have a ride to the airport anymore, and the copy machines didn't have any paper or toner. And the reason why? Nobody asked the administrators, the people who do the day-to-day support, what was needed. I've seen the quality of food in camps that is horrible, that people never came back to the job because they didn't bring enough food or even beds for the people to work because nobody talked to logistics. So for me, in a kickoff meeting, all the functional leads who have a responsibility and a budget should be in the meeting. And I'm sorry, what was the second question again?
Yeah, the second question is, can progress meetings also be held? Can progress meetings also be held?
Well, under the EVM system, basically, beyond the weekly meeting like that, we basically take the monthly progress report and monthly progress meetings. And in those monthly progress meetings, we basically review by CAM or control account manager as we utilize the EVM. And so when all the actuals and schedule inputs are brought in, the project controls team puts it together in a report and they review everything with their team. And if there's a variance, then that project team member gets together with it. And then before the report is finally issued, the entire report is reviewed by the project manager and the management support team to make sure all variances, risk, change have been accounted for in the EVM report. So by running that systematic approach, and that's what EVM audits do, is they verify the team members are doing that, we tend to have a successful implementation of EVM.
Thank you very much. We have about 3 more questions. From Mr. Greg Afameke. We realize that risk exists and have to be managed. There is country risk we may have in Nigeria. How can this country risk be managed? An example is our erratic FX rates, especially on foreign materials and the hidden costs of doing business, which are under the table in some cases. How can this be accounted for and managed? Did you get that? Should I come again?
Yeah. I mean, I can only tell you what I've seen on I've overviewed and done validations on a good amount of projects in Nigeria now. The most common denominator with them was they established processes and procedures, but nobody was trained on how to use the process and procedures. So as such, they did bare schedules, very simplistic estimates, and really had a difficulty in accounting for the cost. So by basically having people trained and establishing methods up front that the people, you know, work together as a team that has reviews or audits at certain points will help reveal the problems. In regard to the procurement, well, we know, as you said, that, you know, 80% of the materials, if not more, are generally imported in. So you need to look at, in the procurement process, of not just what the cost of the material is at the time you quote it, but what is the potential cost of the product in 3 years. That forecasting or escalation of cost was not considered. So on labor, one of the issues that comes up is that under performance metrics done by Compass and others that have evaluated the productivity of the labor force, they find that everything in oil and gas is based on Gulf Coast standards. That if in a Gulf Coast standard, it takes 1 hour for a welder to do work, in another country, it could take between 1.1 to 1.4, i.e. 40% more time to meet the quality of that one weld done in the Gulf Coast standard. And Nigeria runs a productivity factor of 40% based upon Chevron and Shell and other companies turning in their information to CII and Compass and reporting through, you know, professional people and through universities and through the engineer, you know, the usually government economics of labor. It's about a 40% productivity difference, but the cost is reduced. But what happens is that when they bring in subject matter experts to do the work, they did the value based upon the standard of Nigeria, and then they bring in somebody from another area who does it lower but costs 10 times more, not 4 times more. They basically tend to have a problem with that. And then another problem that I've noticed is that you'll have projects that say they're using local labor, and then they decide to go for timing purposes to package units out of the US, UK, and Italy. And those package units use EU, UK, or US rates, but they basically estimated the labor value cost as Nigerian because they said they were going to use local. And so they overrun the labor portion of the module, which is like a lump sum. So my recommendation is basically, you know, you basically estimate and review, and after 3 months, you are immediately going to start seeing a trend, and you should start reviewing and adjusting your labor accordingly. And again, apply the correct percentage of contingency on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sean. We have another question from Mr. Abbas Felix. Then, Mike, during the risk workshop planning, what are the key considerations to bear in mind? Did you get that, or should I come again?
Yeah, try to come again. I'm sure.
Yeah, during the risk workshop planning, what are the key considerations to bear in mind?
Well, in the planning, I try to get each discipline when I facilitate them, from engineering to admin. You try to make sure that everybody participates. One of the problems is you bring people in and they're afraid to speak because their managers are there, or the higher managers, like the department engineering managers there. And so you got civil, mechanical, electrical, IMC, and others, and they don't want to they don't want to speak because they're intimidated. And so it's up to the facilitator to try and extract that in that forum to them. In some countries, there's a caste system. I run into that sometimes with Indians. I run into that when I work in Saudi Arabia. I run into that with Russia. And as such, you know, It's basically trying to bring that information forward, because a lot of times it's the guy who works on it every day who has the items in the workshop. So that's why a facilitator is so critical.
Thank you very much, sir. We have a last question here. Risk management is critical success factor for any project. Do you consider it expedient to hire risk managers in-house or farm it out to external consultants?
Again, it's sort of, let me give you a good one on that. For years, from 2007 all the way almost to 2009, Rosatom, Russian Nuclear, would attend twice a year and bring me in to teach a class on general skills and knowledge. And the problem, so some people, basically, what it did is it built a bedrock of people being trained that started basically saying, look, we keep saying we're going to do a plan, a schedule, and an estimate, but we keep executing projects without them. And in 2016, 2017, they brought myself in, and then I brought five other subject matter experts that they needed. And we developed an entire TCM document for nuclear construction that was developed by Russian Nuclear, 140 pages in Russian, 140 pages in English, translated. That basically took the TCM framework and then went into the details that are specifically in nuclear construction, and they created a book called TCM-NC, and they created a department that basically called Branch Capital Construction Cost, and they became the center point of training and matrixing for all aspects. You had project managers, engineers, cost, schedule, estimating, risk, quality, all within their contract. And that core team helped to implement on projects, setting up project teams. They were having overruns, just to put it in perspective. They estimated $4 billion converted to U.S. currency, $4 billion. Their actual cost was $10 billion. That's a B, not an N, a B. A $6 billion overrun, which meant being a state-owned entity, the Russian government had to pay $6 billion. The Russian government, in their policy of overruns, is every time there's an overrun, they just follow the Russian policy, terminate. So one person took the chance and basically built the system, got people trained, built a reference manual or an execution guide, developed procedures that could be implemented on every project that was consistent. But they took the time to train all the people so that they could function in a team. And people were encouraged and empowered to speak and present. And if there was an issue, it came up and it basically helped them reduce costs. And so the next time they estimated a project, they estimated at $8 billion, even though we came up with $12 billion. They were getting closer. By the third project, they sort of now were estimating projects at $10 billion, and realized that if they improved things, they could bring the 12 down to 10. And they realized that they should estimate those contingency items in from 8 to 10. And by being proactive, the $10 billion budgets right now in the last 3 projects, plus or minus 10%, are within range as they're working. It's not instantaneous. There's no flick of a switch and everybody's going to do it. But by doing that, they're able to improve the process and basically help.
Thank you very much, sir. That will be all from my end. There are no questions.
You can see your screen, Manos. You can go on this.
Hi, my name is Rita. my name is Rita. I'm SSAC Business Development Manager. Welcome to SSAC Advisory and Professionals. SSAC making consulting took the decision early in the year to rebrand after 36 sterling years in business. This is in response to its accelerated corporate growth, renewal of its corporate values, and the constantly changing realities of the world today. At the heart of the initiative is a change of its name to SSAC Advisory and Professionals and a modification of its corporate logo. SSAC Advisory and Professionals is a leading independent accounting, business advisory, and consulting firm, leveraging on the knowledge and experience of its allied consultants and extensive network of local and international associates. It works with clients across various sectors of the economy, including multinational and multilateral agencies, equipping them with enduring business excellence and the ability to apply value for money tools that aid them to do more with less, just as it adopts a collaborative approach to partnering with startups, SMEs, corporate and public organizations wanting to enhance performance and maximize shareholder and stakeholder value. As SSAC, we render services such as business advisory, accounting and assurance, financial services, and SME business support services. Under business advisory, we have project management, performance measurement benchmarking, value for money review, tax advisory. Under project management, we offer exceptional consulting services in the area of project control, coordination management, and system development on projects. On performance measurement benchmarking complements performance measurements. We ensure our clients that project or policy data is structured in a manner that it can be utilized to generate metrics to measure and challenge performance and enhance process improvements. Value for money review. Value for money review is suitable for large and mega-sized capital projects and provide assurance to stakeholders that the project was carried out efficiently, economically, and effectively. Accounting and assurance. Under accounting and assurance, in the rapidly changing business and regulatory environments, appropriate business solutions is of utmost importance to businesses in the following areas like forensic accounting and corporate governance. Tax advisory. Tax is one of the single largest business costs for most businesses. It supports relevant tax authorities and taxpayers to mutually develop a reliable partnership in the establishment of certainty as to the legitimate tax liabilities through our tax-related services as listed below. Payroll services, tax strategy and compliance, petroleum profit tax, tax audit and investigation, expatriate taxation, transfer pricing review. Financial services. SSAC Financial Services offer businesses and financiers all the necessary skills and expertise to serve every aspect of their transactions. Our firm offers financial services, including model audits, value and risk management, corporate and project finance, due diligence and valuation, transaction advisory, merger and acquisition. SME business support services. Under SME business support services, we have business plan, business process reengineering. Business plan. Good business management starts with making proper business plan. As age-old saying goes, if one fails to plan, plans to fail. Under business process reengineering is a highly focused inspection of internal systems, processes, procedures, and organizations. To support your project to be delivered at best value, please call SSAC and Advisory and Professionals on the numbers on the screen. Again, to support your project to be delivered at best value, please call SSAC Advisory and Professionals on the numbers on the screen. Thank you very much.
Very much, Rita. Thank you very much. This has been awesome. I believe we've all learned a lot from this, and this has been wonderful. I'm going to bring up Mr. Mr. Tony is one of our partners here at SSSC, and will be giving us the vote of thanks as we round up this. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Tony.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Tony Nyomo, a director in SSSC Advisory and Professionals. I would like to, first of all, profoundly thank our guest speaker, even though he's no longer with us now, he has exited, Dr. Sean Regan, for the excellent presentation. The MD of SSSC Advisory has, in his opening remarks, spoken about the pedigree of Sean. But suffice to also mention that Sean has partnered with us severally to deliver projects. He is always available at short notice each time we need him. So many thanks to him. To the participants, I want to, on behalf of SSSC Advisory and Professional, thank you all for making out time from your very busy schedule to attend this webinar. I'm sure that you may have all learned one or more useful lessons from the presentation. So do feel free to contact us at SSC Advisory and Professional should you require support in any of the areas discussed in the course of the presentation. The next in the series of our webinars is planned for early December, and you will be duly notified before the due date. We appreciate you once more for making out time from a very busy schedule to attend the webinar. And thank you, and God bless you as you continue the rest of the evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tony. I also want to appreciate everybody that asked the question, Dr. Godson, Mr. Greg, Mr. Abbas. Thank you all very much for, also Mr. Uchichuku. Thank you for those very important questions. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for attending this webinar. And of course, many thanks to Sean Regan for giving us this lecture, very educative, enlightening. And I do hope that, we'll take it to heart and apply some of the techniques in our various institutions so that projects can be better delivered and successfully delivered at best value. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Look forward to seeing you early December on the next webinar. Bye-bye.